Welcome, Aaron here. I'm so glad you're joining me today. This is the third episode in my series called Difficult Conversations. Have you ever had a moment where you felt like maybe you had ESP, like extrasensory perception? I used to have a moment like this consistently when I would come home from work because my wife and I, we started dating when she was 13 and I was 14. So I just thought we were super connected. But when we got married, I would pull in the driveway and without being able to see her or having talked with her throughout the day, I knew, somehow I just knew in my body that she was happy or sad or mad. So sometimes I'd pull in the driveway and be like, oh shoot, how do I sneak in the house? But other times I would come in and be like, oh, I think tonight's going to be a good night. And I thought that we just had some really amazing connection. But I discovered something that really helped me learn the science behind this. And this is a powerful thing for difficult conversations. And I'm going to tell you why. Well, it just so happens that I didn't have ESP. I didn't have extrasensory perception. What I discovered is that our bodies have this incredible ability to put out an electrical signal. That's right. Research has shown that our hearts put out a 300-foot electrical signal. And those electrical signals can basically interact with each other. So imagine around your body, you have like concentric circles going around you of an electric signal that's going out. And if you're in a place of anger or you're in a place of frustration, your signal, imagine it's going jagged, it's going up and down like this. Whereas if you're happy, your signal might be going more like this, like a Yanni song. So what happens is when your heart rate is elevated, it sends out a certain signal. And then when other people experience that signal, they don't know why. They're not totally sure why, but they feel what's happening with you and their heart wants to begin to match whatever your heart is. So if your heartbeat is at an elevated place where you are angry, have you ever had a moment where people begin to match you? Or have you ever walked into a room and you don't know why, but it seems like everyone's pissed or angry, and then you begin to feel that anger as well? It's not because you have ESP, it's because your hearts are actually literally syncing up to one another. Now, this is going to sound crazy, right? Your hearts are syncing together, but you have to realize too, the first part of you that formed was not your brain, it was actually your heart. And your heart has its own kind of intelligence. Your heart actually sends twice as many signals to your brain as your brain does to the rest of your body. You see, your heart developed first. And so your heart is sending all kinds of signals that go to your brain, and then your brain tells the rest of your body what to do. But if your heart rate is elevated and you're beginning to pick up on what's happening in the room, what's happening right there is you begin to match whatever's happening in the room. So what this can cause is our hearts can be out of sync. And when our hearts get out of sync, it creates all kinds of challenges, all kinds of problems. So if you're angry and I'm happy, or I'm happy and you're angry, and we come into a room, what happens is our hearts are working on different electrical signals and frequencies. And when we're off like that, it creates the tension that we feel. And when our hearts are out of sync like that, it makes it more difficult to solve problems. So you imagine if you're having a difficult conversation and you're coming in from a place of peace and the other person's coming in from a place of anger, it becomes hard to get that person to hear what you're trying to say. Maybe you've experienced that. Or vice versa. You're coming in from a place of heavy frustration and anger, and the other person's coming from a place of peace. Or if you're both coming from a place of anger, boom, it's an explosion, and you wonder why that's happening. It's because your hearts are literally elevating one another. And so you have this ability with your heart literally to help regulate the room just by managing your heart rate. So I'm going to give you one quick tip and tool that you can use that can help you to bring your heart rate down and to help the other person who you're having a difficult conversation with to bring their heart rate down so you can actually solve the problem. And it's really simple. I call it the power walk. Now, the power walk is something that you can do, especially if you're having a difficult conversation, to proactively be strategic so that you don't end up in a place of reactivity, but you can stay in a place of focus and you can stay in a place where you can actually solve the problem. So it's really simple. What the power walk does is what you do is you begin to go on a walk. And when you walk, you want to walk nice and slow. Walk shoulder to shoulder. You're not necessarily making eye contact to get each other worked up. You just walk, and for about 5 to 10 minutes, you don't talk about the problem that you're there to talk about. You talk about life. You talk about things you have in common. You talk about things that bring you gratitude and joy. And you walk nice and slow. And so what happens is your heart rate, which was going like this because you were mad, because you're walking nice and slow, it begins to bring your heart rate down to a steady level. But more importantly, what it does is the other person whose heart rate might have been going all over the place as well, it begins to bring their heart rate, which was going up and down and crazy, it begins to help your heart rates to sync. And when your heart rates begin to sync, it's easier to solve problems. Now, this is a really cool thing. It works like magic. And I promise you, it's not magic. It's science. When you do this, it syncs your hearts, which tells your body how to respond. The other way that you can sync your hearts, which this might be weird, I don't know if you could get someone to do this, is just holding and controlling your breathing. Just by controlling your breathing and deep breathing, what it does is it helps your heart rate to slow down. And when your heart rate slows down, it tells your brain you're safe. But when your heart rate increases, it tells you that you need to be in reactivity mode. You go back into survival mode. So this is a tip that you can use, is to go on a power walk, get your hearts in sync, and then have the conversation. A lot of times, the best conversations that I have with my wife happen when we go on walks. Why? Because we can talk about finances, we can talk about the kids, we can talk about our dreams. Because when we're walking, our hearts are in sync. And when our hearts are in sync, we're more receptive to one another.